Let us learn how exceptions are processed by PLSQL. Exceptions can be generated or they can occur in declaration, execution, or even exception part of a PLSQL block. Let us assume that an exception has occurred. If it is in execution part of PLSQL block, then first it is check if there is an handler for that exception or not. If there is an handler for the exception, then that handler code is executed and execution of block is completed. And then the control is passed to the parent or enclosing block. If there is no handler for the current exception, then the exception is propagated or sent to the enclosing or parent block. Then it checks if there is a handler defined in the enclosing or parent block. If yes, then exception is handled and block execution is completed. If no, then again the exception is propagated to its parent block. This process continues until that exception is handled or there is no enclosing or parent block. In case if no enclosing block is there, then the exception is reported to the host or calling environment as error. Exception can occur in declaration or exception part of PLSQL block as well. In these cases, exception is immediately propagated to the enclosing or parent block. Please note that in this case, exception is never handled in the same block even if there is a handler defined. It is always propagated to the parent or enclosing block. If parent block handles the exception, then PLSQL block execution is completed. Otherwise, the exception is propagated further to its parent block. This process continues until that exception is handled or there is no enclosing or parent block. In case if no enclosing block, then the exception is reported to the host or calling environment as error. So, this is how exception propagation happens in PLSQL. In this demo, we will learn exception propagation scenario of handling exception locally and then resumption of execution in the parent or enclosing block. I have already written a stored procedure here which I have opened. SPEX propagation 1. Let us quickly go through the code which I have written. Here I have declared an exception E1. Then inside the execution part, here I am printing a simple message inside parent block before nested block. Here is the nested block inside this procedure. Let's study it later. After the nested block, again I am printing a message inside parent block after nested block. Then here I am handling exception E1 at the procedure level, and here you can see when an E1 exception is caught, I am simply printing a message exception E1 caught in parent block. Let us now see what is there in the nested block. Okay. So, first I am simply printing a message inside a nested block before exception. Then here I am raising exception E1 So before raising this exception, I am printing this message. Then after raising exception even, again I am printing a message here inside a nested block after exception. Then there is exception handling part for that nested block. Again here I am handling exception even only, and then here I am printing message exception even caught in nested block. So this is how our simple procedure is written. Now what we will do, we will run this procedure in a debug mode and understand how it is getting executed. So let's compile this procedure in debug mode. So you can see here, compile for debug. Okay, it has compiled. So let me put a breakpoint here. Okay, now let's start execution of our procedure. You can see I am clicking here. So I am starting the execution in debug mode. Let me click OK. There we go. You can see currently the control is on the first line here inside parent block before nested block. Now we will see the execution line by line. So let me press F8. So now the control is entering into nested block. So it has entered nested block. So it is printing a message inside a nested block before exception. Next statement is raise even. Now here we are going to raise exception even. Please watch this carefully. Now you can see the control has transferred to the exception handler of nested block. Let's see whether it is handling this exception or not. There we go. You can see the exception even is caught here. So it is printing message exception even caught in nested block. Please note that the line inside nested block after exception, this line of code which we have written after raise even has not executed when there is an exception. So straight away the control has gone to the exception handler. So exception is handled locally. Now let's see where the execution will be resumed. Let me press F8. Once more, you can see the control has come out of the nested block, and where the execution has resumed, it is resumed to the line of code immediately after the nested block, and hence you can see it is going to print a message inside parent block after nested block. Let me press F8 again. There we go. You can see it is finishing its execution. So this is how once an exception is captured or handled locally, then the resumption of execution is continued in the parent or enclosing block. With this, we are finishing our first demo.